Brother stole my business idea and got applauded. You should be happy for him, my parents said. I didn't argue, just started my own company. Months later, he was desperate when I still remember the exact moment I found out. I was sitting at the dinner table with my family, halfway through a bite of mashed potatoes, when my father turned to my brother, Eric, and said, "Son, we're so proud of you. Starting your own business at such a young age, that takes real ambition." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My mother beamed at him. "We always knew you had that entrepreneurial spirit in you." Eric grinned, soaking in the praise. My sister clapped lightly, my father raised a glass, and I sat there, stunned. Because Eric didn't have an entrepreneurial spirit. He had my idea. I had spent months refining a business concept, a sleek, streamlined online marketplace for customized athletic gear. I had researched, planned, even drafted a business proposal. And I had made the mistake of sharing it with Eric one night when we were both up late in the kitchen, talking over coffee like brothers. And now, here he was, announcing it as his own, basking in the admiration of our parents. I cleared my throat, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Eric," I said, keeping my tone neutral, "you never mentioned you were working on something like this." He gave me a sideways glance, shrugging. "It just sort of came together. I guess we had similar ideas." Similar ideas. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to call him out on it. But all I saw were smiling faces. My father clapped him on the back. "Well, I think it's fantastic. Your brother should be happy for you." Happy? I swallowed the bitter taste rising in my throat and forced a tight smile. "Yeah," I said. "Fantastic." I didn't argue. I didn't call him out. Instead, I finished my meal in silence. Because while Eric was busy basking in his stolen spotlight, I had already made a decision. I was going to build something better. And when I was done, he wouldn't have a business left to celebrate. I didn't sleep that night. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept replaying dinner in my head, Eric's smug grin, my parents' applause, the way they expected me to just accept it. But I wasn't going to accept it. I got up, grabbed my laptop, and started working. I still had my original notes, my business plan, and all the research I had done. If Eric wanted to steal my idea, fine. But he had no idea how much work it actually took to make it successful. And that was my advantage. For the next few weeks, I barely spoke to him. While he was busy giving interviews to local blogs and celebrating his genius, I was refining my concept, improving it, strengthening it, making it something he wouldn't even be able to compete with. I stayed quiet. I let him have his moment. But then, the first cracks in his business started to show. It happened at a family gathering. My uncle, who owned a small chain of sporting goods stores, was congratulating Eric when he casually asked, "So how are you handling logistics? Fulfillment must be a nightmare with so many custom orders." Eric's smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, we're still figuring that out," he said quickly, waving it off. "But it's all under control." I hid my smirk behind my drink. It wasn't under control. I knew because I had spent weeks researching fulfillment centers, suppliers, and shipping costs. Custom athletic gear wasn't easy to scale. It required precision, strong supplier relationships, and airtight financial management. And Eric? He had none of that. I could already tell what had happened. He had rushed into the business, fueled by stolen ideas and blind confidence, without thinking through the logistics. Without realizing that a great idea wasn't enough. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 came a few days later when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. "I don't understand," my mom was saying, her voice hushed. "He said investors were interested. Why does he need more money? He just needs a little help," my dad replied. "It's normal for new businesses. I told him we pitch in if it gets bad." I shook my head. Eric was already running out of money. And he hadn't even seen what was coming next. Eric was drowning, but he didn't know it yet. While he was scrambling to keep his business afloat, I was quietly building mine. Every mistake he made, I learned from. Every flaw in his execution, I fixed in mine. The first thing I did was find the best suppliers, the ones that could deliver high-quality custom athletic gear fast and at a lower cost. I negotiated directly with manufacturers, something Eric had skipped entirely, relying instead on overpriced middlemen. Then I set up my fulfillment system. I found a reliable logistics company that could handle bulk shipments and custom orders seamlessly. While Eric was constantly dealing with delayed deliveries and unhappy customers, I was building a reputation for speed and efficiency. But the real fun started when I reached out to potential clients, many of whom Eric had already tried to work with. At first, I was subtle. I sent professional emails, made my pitch, and let my product do the talking. But when I realized how frustrated they were with Eric's delays, excuses, and poor quality control, I leaned in. "I heard you've been having some trouble with your supplier," I'd say casually. "If you're looking for a more reliable option, we can take care of that for you." One by one, Eric's biggest clients started switching to me. I didn't advertise it. I didn't rub it in. I just let it happen. The first time Eric noticed, it was almost comical. He had been bragging at dinner about a new contract he was signing with a mid-sized gym chain. My dad was practically beaming. "They're really excited," Eric said, puffing out his chest. "This is going to take us to the next level." I sipped my drink and waited. 2 days later, I got a call from the same gym chain. "We were going to go with your brother's company," the manager told me. "But honestly, we're having second thoughts. His team isn't responsive, and we've heard some bad reviews about delays. Can you match his pricing?" I smiled. "I can do better." 3 days later, the contract was mine. Eric had no idea. Not yet. But soon he would. The first real sign of panic came when Eric showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking stressed. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced with something new, uncertainty. "Hey," he said, forcing a casual tone. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the doorframe. "About what?" He ran a hand through his hair. "Business." That got my attention. I stepped aside, letting him in. He paced my living room, hands in his pockets, before finally blurting out, "Have you been talking to my clients?" I kept my expression neutral. "Why?" "Because I've lost 3 big contracts in the past 2 weeks. They're all suddenly going with some new company that does exactly what I do, but better." He shot me a look. "And I can't help but notice you've been working on something lately." I shrugged. "It's a competitive market." His jaw clenched. "Come on, man. You're seriously trying to steal my business?" That made me laugh. I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. "Steal your business? You mean the business you stole from me?" He flinched. "Oh, don't look so shocked, Eric," I said, my voice calm. "You think I didn't notice? You took my idea, my concept, my hard work, and ran with it like it was yours. And you thought I was just going to sit back and let you have it?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he looked genuinely rattled. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to get caught," I interrupted. "You thought you could cut corners, skip the hard work, and somehow make it big. But now you're realizing something, aren't you?" I leaned back with a smirk. "You're out of your depth." Eric looked away, jaw tight. "This isn't a game." "Oh, but it is," I said. "And I've been playing it a lot better than you." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then he said something that erased any trace of sympathy I had left. "Mom and Dad said you should help me." I let out a sharp laugh. Of course. Of course they did. "They think I should be happy for you, right?" I said, shaking my head. "That I should put all this aside because family comes first?" Eric exhaled, relieved that I understood. "Exactly. Look, I know I messed up. But we can work together." I held up a hand. "No." His face fell. "What?" "I'm not helping you," I said simply. "In fact, I'm going to do the exact opposite." He blinked. "What does that mean?" I smiled. "It means you should start preparing for what happens next. because his downfall had only just begun. Eric left my apartment looking pale, but I knew he wasn't done fighting. He still thought he could salvage this, that maybe, just maybe, I would soften up and help him. But he didn't understand. This wasn't just business to me. This was personal. And I wasn't done yet. Over the next few weeks, I made my next move. It was one thing to take his clients, but I wanted to hit him where it really hurt, his team. Eric had been lucky enough to hire a few decent employees early on, but he treated them terribly. He overworked them, underpaid them, and ignored their concerns. I knew because one of them, Chris, his best sales guy, had reached out to me. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, man," Chris told me over coffee one afternoon. "Eric doesn't listen to anyone. He's making bad decisions, the company's bleeding money, and instead of fixing the problems, he's blaming us." I took a sip of my drink. "You looking for a new job?" Chris exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "I might be." "Then let's talk." Within a week, I had poached Chris and two of Eric's other best employees. They didn't just quit, they left loudly, making sure other employees knew exactly why they were leaving. Eric tried to do damage control, but it was too late. His company, already struggling with lost clients and bad management, was now falling apart from the inside. And then, the final blow came. One evening, I got a call from a mutual friend. "Dude," he said, barely containing his laughter, "Eric's business is on the verge of collapse. He's looking for investors, but no one will touch him." I leaned back in my chair, satisfied. "Keep me posted," I said, because I knew what was coming next. Eric was going to hit rock bottom. And when he did, he'd come crawling back. And I was going to be ready. It didn't take long. A week after his employees started jumping ship, Eric showed up at my door again. This time, he didn't try to act casual. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usual confidence completely gone. I opened the door and leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "Something wrong?" Eric let out a shaky breath. "I need your help." There it was. I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Help? That's interesting. Because last time we talked, you were still pretending we were on the same level." He swallowed hard. "Look, I know I messed up. I should have been honest with you from the start. I shouldn't have taken your idea." I held up a hand. "Spare me the speech. What do you actually want?" He hesitated, then ran a hand through his hair. "I need money. A loan. Just to keep things running while I figure things out." I almost laughed. "A loan?" He nodded quickly, his face full of forced hope. "Just enough to cover payroll this month. If I can get through this rough patch, I can turn things around." I smirked. "You don't have a rough patch, Eric. You have a failing business." He flinched. "I can fix it." "No, you can't," I said flatly. "Because you never actually built it. You stole the idea, rushed through the execution, and now you're drowning because you don't know how to run a company." Eric's face crumpled. "Come on, man. We're brothers." I felt a flicker of something, old instincts telling me to help, to fix things like I always had. But then I remembered dinner that night. I remembered my parents smiling at him, telling me I should be happy for him. I remembered every smug look, every arrogant comment. I shook my head. "Not my problem." His desperation cracked into anger. "You're really just going to let me fail?" I smiled. "No, Eric." I leaned in slightly. "I'm going to make sure of it." He stared at me, stunned. "You're serious?" I nodded. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't a temporary setback. This wasn't something he could charm his way out of. He had betrayed me. And now he was going to pay the price. Eric didn't come back after that. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. No excuses, no justifications, just the cold reality that he had lost. But of course, my parents weren't about to let things go so easily. It started with a phone call from my mom. "Honey," she said, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "Can we talk?" I sighed. "About what?" "Your brother." Of course. He told us what happened, she continued. And look, we understand you're upset, but don't you think you've punished him enough? I let out a short laugh. Punished him? You mean by not letting him steal from me twice? She made a frustrated sound. It's not about that. He's struggling, sweetheart. His business is collapsing, and he's under so much stress. Can't you help him? Like how he helped me? I asked. She hesitated. You have to let this go. No, Mom, I said calmly. I really don't. Then my dad got on the phone. This is ridiculous, he said, his voice firm. He's your brother. Family takes care of each other. Funny, I said. Where was that energy when he stole my business? Silence. Then my mom sighed dramatically. You're being so cruel. Cruel? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You told me to be happy for him when he took my idea. Now that he's failing, I should save him? Yes, she snapped, finally dropping the fake sweetness. Because that's what family does. I let that hang in the air for a second. Then I said, No. That's what I always did. But not anymore. Dad's voice was sharp. You'll regret this. I smirked. Eric already does. Then I hung up. I had won. And they all knew it. After that phone call, I expected Eric to try something desperate. Maybe he'd attempt to relaunch under a new name, maybe he'd beg someone else for a bailout, or maybe, just maybe, he'd finally admit defeat. But I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I made my next move. Eric still had a handful of clients left, small businesses and gyms that hadn't switched over to me yet. I reached out to them personally, offering them an even better deal than before. One by one, they signed with me. I also went after his last remaining employees. A few were still loyal to him, clinging to the idea that he could turn things around. But after I showed them the numbers, how much debt he was in, how little runway he had left, they saw the writing on the wall. Within 2 weeks, I had taken everything. His business wasn't just struggling anymore. It was dead. And then, just when I thought it was over, I got an email. From Eric. Subject, let's talk. I opened it, half expecting another plea for help. But it was short. I know you won't help me, but I don't have a choice. I need to sell. You win. Name your price. I leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. He was selling. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. He had drained every resource, maxed out every loan, and burned every bridge. He was done. So I made him an offer. Pennies on the dollar. Less than a tenth of what the business had once been worth. A real businessman would have shopped around, tried to negotiate, found another buyer. But Eric? He was too desperate. He signed the paperwork that same week. And just like that, the company he stole from me now belonged to me. I didn't keep it. I shut it down. Every trace of Eric's failed attempt was wiped from existence. His logo, his website, his branding, gone. All that remained was my business, my success, and his failure. After the deal was finalized, I expected Eric to lash out. Maybe he'd try to blame me, claim I had sabotaged him, or throw some kind of last-ditch tantrum. But he didn't. He disappeared. No more social media posts bragging about his success. No more family dinners where he played the role of the golden child. No more smug confidence. Just silence. A week after I shut his company down, I ran into him by accident. I was grabbing coffee at a small cafe when I spotted him sitting alone in the corner, hunched over his phone. He looked different. His usual arrogance was gone. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt. He was scrolling through job listings, his fingers tapping anxiously on the table. I walked past him, fully expecting to leave without a word. But just as I reached the door, I heard him say, "Wait." I turned. For a moment, he just stared at me, as if searching for something, maybe a hint of mercy, maybe some sign that I'd undo what I had done. But I just waited. He let out a shaky breath. "You really took everything, huh?" I tilted my head. "I didn't take it, Eric. You handed it to me." His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. I lost everything, he muttered, more to himself than to me. The business, my savings. Mom and Dad won't even help me. He let out a bitter laugh. Guess I should have seen that coming. I watched him, waiting to see if he'd take responsibility. If he'd admit what he had done. But of course he didn't. You happy now? He finally asked. I thought about that for a second. Then I smiled. Yes. And with that I walked out, leaving him sitting there, alone, broke, and finally understanding what betrayal really felt like. After that day at the cafe, I didn't see much of Eric. Word spread through the family that he was struggling, looking for work, trying to recover, grasping at anything that would make him feel like less of a failure. But no one was offering him a hand this time. Not even our parents. The same parents who had cheered him on, told me to be happy for him, and scolded me for not helping. Now they were suddenly silent. They had invested in his business, convinced he was destined for success. When he went under, so did their faith in him. They weren't mad at me anymore. They were mad at him. And that was the worst part for Eric, realizing that the love and admiration he had taken for granted had always been conditional. The moment he failed, they dropped him. Just like he had expected me to pick up the pieces of his mistakes, he had expected them to do the same. But they didn't. That's when I knew I had truly won. Not just because I had built the better business. Not just because I had taken everything from him. But because I had walked away on my own terms. I had proven, beyond any doubt, that success belongs to those who earn it. And Eric? He had learned, far too late, that betrayal comes at a price. One that he would be paying for a very long time.